Hi, I'm David with EV World News. We talk about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. I'm back in the studio today with founder and chief editor Bill Moore. How's it going today, Bill?
It is going well, thank you very much. Although we had a bunch of rain last night. I went out for my walk and there was signs of a lot. In fact, the mayor here just sent out an email alert that one of our recreational lakes that they built and have been slowly
hmm
filling, it's now full.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
My retention ponds in my subdivision, one day they'll be completely dry, and the next day there'll actually be a pond with ducks on them and stuff
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
They're completely full right now. I've been meaning to go down when the rain lets up to go look at the creek behind my house to see
yeah.
what kind of levels it's at because it could rise. I think one of
Well,
the
we ought,
funnier things you see are when people start tubing down the Papillion Creek, which really is just a drainage ditch.
yeah,
It's a very large drainage ditch, and you see
yeah,
people
exactly.
tubing. But when I say large drainage ditch, I mean it is a very large drainage ditch,
Yeah.
flowing into the Missouri River. But you do see some crazy stuff.
And
Um,
it used to, at once upon a time, it used to power the town's grist mill.
really? Well,
Yeah,
that's impressive.
You know where Lincoln Park is
Yeah.
down on the
hmm
street? That used to be the site of the original grist mill, and that creek used to wind back. There's remnants of that creek still there, and that was what powered the grist mill in the late for the town in the late 1800s.
Nice, nice. Well, today we're going to cover Jim Farley's comments. We're going to cover CATL's aircraft batteries. We're going to cover, oh, let's see what we got here. A company called Sea Glider
Mm-hmm.
and a couple of stories on it. A story about a fact check on Donald Trump, and also a story about a company called Universal Hydrogen. So we've got
Yeah.
quite a few stories to cover today, and we will see where we get with this. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Jim Farley. So Jim Farley is the CEO of Ford Motor, and I
Yeah.
saw recently he's completely switched to driving EVs personally, and now he's calling on the US to try to rally behind EVs. And the gist of the story is, he's coming right out and saying, hey, there's a lot of disinformation being released out there
Yeah.
about EVs and information that you and I tried to educate people on, that because people simply aren't getting correct knowledge, and they have, or at least it's some of the ideas that there's some root truth to the thing. There are EVs that have caught on fire. There was a problem with General Motors cars catching on fire. Other brands, not so much. There's a lot of, is it the BYD Han that keeps catching on fire over in China? I mean,
So I
there's been
hear.
some
Yeah.
really particular ones, but they don't really catch on fire much. And there's all these other
Yeah.
stories, things that have gone
Well,
on.
how many recall notices do we see in a year's time where they ask the company? I don't know. There's several every year, involving thousands of vehicles, not electric, gas powered vehicles that say, please park your vehicle outside of your garage on the street or on the driveway. Don't put it in your garage until we get this recall fixed because it'll catch fire spontaneously. So it happens, and it happens to gas powered cars, and it happens occasionally with far less frequency to electric, except that electrics are so new and it has such a personalities involved around it, from obviously Elon Musk to Henrik Fisker to Jim Farley, that easily grabs headlines, because that's the whole business of publishing online is you want those eyeballs. So you write captivating headlines because this one guy ran into an oak tree with his Tesla, or, his cyber truck went through the roof of a garage or stores. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that what is it? If it bleeds, it leads. In the old days of
Yeah.
newsprint. So
Well,
same
and it
same
still
thing
is that
applies
way. I
digitally.
mean, people want to watch the world burn. I mean, that's really what people watch the news for.
As long
And
as long as they're not within the flame of the or heat of the conflagration. So yeah.
Yeah.
So that soon
Farley.
fun.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was going to say, well, here's a quote from Farley. It is astonishingly quiet and smooth. The effortless acceleration leaves you with a silly grin once you get the feeling back in your face. Every morning, mine is topped off with 300 miles of range, no gas stations ever. What's more, my F-150 Lightning is a massive lockable frunk to go along with the pickup bed. And the Lightning works like a mobile generator that can power a worksite, campsite, tailgate, or even another electric vehicle or power my home. This is what Farley wrote. He's got a F-150 Lightning Platinum. And, he's just saying that people just don't get it,
No, they
until
don't.
they've owned one.
And the interesting thing is that old Henry Ford, one of his best friends was Thomas Edison, and they collaborated together to build an electric version of the Model T. And unfortunately, there were setbacks at Edison's lab, and of course, I don't think the material science was up to the point at that point, as well as they didn't have electronics. You were lucky if you had a diode. I forget the name of the crystal, for crystal radios. I mean, they didn't have vacuum tubes and things like that to control the electronics in these things. So it was that the battery part was premature, but they were on the right track in 1912. So
Right. It's so funny. Yeah, and Farley went on to say, most compellingly, once people try an EV, they usually don't want to go back. Nearly 70% of global EV owners say they'll only buy electric vehicles in the future. And we've seen some contradiction. Now, that was a global statement, not a U.S. statement. But the U.S. is just behind the rest of the world.
Well, and you keep seeing, and this frustrates me to no end, you keep seeing this story of, who was it that did it, J.D. Powers or somebody, where they asked, what was it, 46% of EV owners want to go back to gas.
That's not what it said, though. It said 46% don't plan on buying an EV as their next purchase. They didn't say they were going to get rid of their EV, but they may be buying a gas car or a hybrid as their next purchase.
Yeah, well, see,
so it wasn't exactly.
That's not how the headlines are written, right?
No, it's not. That's not how it was framed. That's for sure.
It's half of people don't like the EVs and they're going to dump them and go back to gasoline. That's the frustrating thing. The misinformation part of this thing we were talking about, Jim Farley mentioned. So yeah. He left his F-150 Lightning. I had the chance to drive one. I don't know if it was a platinum edition, but boy, for a pickup truck, you cannot believe how that sucker moves. Wow. It really gets up and goes. So yeah.
Yeah. And when you see an F-150 Lightning, you don't know it's a Lightning because you can't tell unless you get right up on it and you can see the sticker.
Well, that, or you get up to the left-hand side of the car, in front of the door, and you'll see that little charge port door there. Yeah. That's really the only thing that gives it away.
Right, and the front grille looks a little different.
Yeah, you don't, because there's no radiator to cool.
Right.
Like he points out, there's a frunk, a front trunk, huge thing up in the front of that vehicle. You can haul all kinds of stuff securely without having to put anything, back in the bed of the truck.
So let's move on. Let's talk about universal hydrogen. So
a European company that was leading in the development of using hydrogen to power what I would call short haul aircraft, commercial aircraft. And they had last year, that may have been the straw that broke the camel's back. They had a crash in one of their early prototypes or one of the early test vehicles. But they just this week or late last week declared bankruptcy. So another promising new technology, but this takes so much money to do this. And of course, hydrogen is sort of that energy source that's kind of, maybe it's at the tipping point, but which way it tips is really hard to say, because in this case, tipped in the bankruptcy direction. But the idea was that you're going to have hydrogen stored on board the aircraft. You had a hydrogen fuel cell mounted. I think it was in that nacelle that we're looking there on the starboard side of the aircraft. Of course, powering an electric motor, and on the opposite side, on the port side, the port side of the aircraft, they had a conventional turboprop engine, and it all seemed to be working. Other than, like I said, they had last year about this time, or maybe a little longer ago, they had one of their aircraft crash. So sad to see, but again, maybe ahead of its time.
It could be that they were simply too soon with this
too soon and
type
not
of business.
not capitalized enough. I mean, I learned that lesson when I started Quick Bike, and the state advised me, I don't think you're capitalized enough. And I said, no, we got enough to do it. Yeah, right. Well, no, we didn't.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
Well, the startup's chairman said in a letter to shareholders that executives were unable to secure sufficient equity or debt financing to continue operations, and similarly were unable to secure an actionable offer for a sale of the business or similar strategic exit transaction. Yeah, it's very unfortunate. I think hydrogen is going to have its place in something.
And it may be in aviation. Unfortunately, it takes pretty big tanks to store the energy equivalent of aviation jet fuel. So that adds weight, and that adds takes up from potential cargo space and all those issues. So I mean, the fuel cells, that technology is moving along well. Rolls-Royce is working on this. General Electric is working on this. So we're seeing progress being made in the propulsion side of it, but then getting a company to be able to move that beyond the prototype or concept stage, that becomes much more problematic. So,
well, let's talk about Sea Glider. So this is kind of an interesting company.
On the other side of the equation, there's a little Rhode Island company that has made a what they call the Sea Glider, and basically it's a combination boat, hydrofoil, and airplane. And there's some pictures of it there. But here's the concept, is that this will be it's all electric. There's no hydrogen or anything like that involved. It's an electric with batteries involved. Has about, I think it said about 180-mile range. Now, the way this thing works is it takes like the old seaplanes of the 1930s, the Boeings and those, takes off, from a dock, like a boat. It has, go back that one photograph, the previous one. Yeah, if you look under there, you'll see there's back there. See the hydrofoil below the fin there. So it has a hydrofoil. So when it gets, just like the America's Cup yacht racers and things like that, they're using this hydrofoil concept. So it gets up to speed. It climbs above the water, so it gets away from the resistance of the water. And then once it reaches enough forward airspeed for the wings to generate some lift, she lifts out of the water and progresses along. Now, what's interesting, it's called a sea glider because it never gets above the water more than its wingspan. And I forget the exact term of the concept, but basically what it's doing is those wings are creating a cushion of air. So it's providing some lift, but more importantly, it's providing a cushion of air below the aircraft. So as long as it stays low above the water, no more than the span of the wings, it can fly, and it'll do, maybe it was 180 miles an hour, I think, or knots or whatever it was. But that's the concept. So this particular company is really starting to get some serious, potential orders or interest in it. And they are apparently they've got an order out of a company, I forget, Mitsui Logistics or something like that, to sell a bunch of them and operate a bunch of them in Japan. because as we've talked about before, Japan is obviously a series of islands. Most of the population is located along the coast. So an aircraft like this moving at 100 and whatever it is, 150, 180 knots, just skimming above the water would be really an ideal kind of a commuter aircraft. I think this one, the first one that they're building, which is I think called the Viceroy, seats about 12 passengers. They have a larger version, which I think is like closer to 70 seats or something like that. That they're envisioning.
It's getting big.
Yeah. So yeah, there's that's there. Now I don't know. I haven't seen whether they've actually, now those are those illustrations or are those real full scale aircraft? I don't know because I haven't seen that much information on them of late, other than this article and some photographs. So I think I've got in my database 3 stories about this company. So
yeah, well, one of the stories was about Southwest Airlines has decided to join in a study to see how efficient it would be operating around the Hawaiian Islands.
Yeah, right. Yep.
But you'd still have to.
And of course, there's a comparable company over in Norway that's looking to do very similar concept, ground effect aircraft, I think they're called, that they can use to connect communities along the Norwegian fjords and things. So there are places where this obviously would make sense. I think there's another company that is looking to operate out of Tampa Bay and connect some of the communities along Florida's coast. So this is promising, and they're all electric, and the power requirements are not the same as you would have if you had to fly at 15 or 20,000 feet. These, like I said, can take advantage of that ground effect, and that saves them energy.
All right. So you wanted to talk about an SFO area air taxi.
Yeah. So we're on there flying here today, of course, as you can tell. Can you see the airplanes behind me? All right. So there's a company called Archer Aviation that has done a deal with a developer. Okay, now what the name slips me at the moment. But anyway, developer in the San Francisco Bay Area that is going to be setting up air taxiing, and we call VTOL. These are vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, and they're electric as well. And so they're looking to set up a service that operates out of Oyster Point. If you're familiar with San Francisco, that's an area just a few miles north of San Francisco International Airport, on the bay side of San Francisco Bay. And so the idea is they're going to operate at 5 different locations. So presumably, if you are wanting to land in San Francisco and you want to get to Napa Valley, and you don't want to take an hour and a half after renting a car and driving across the Bay Area Bridge and all that stuff, which you've probably done and I've done on a couple of occasions. All you got to do is, take the BART. It looks like they're going to connect it with the BART. Take the BART from the airport over to Oyster Point, get in one of their Archer VTOLs, and you can be in Napa Valley in 20 minutes or whatever it is. So they're hoping that'll become a potential money maker for them that can be modeled and put elsewhere. So I think they're looking at doing that either in 25 or in 2026, having that all put together. So it'll be interesting to see. Again, electric aviation at its finest. So
are the eVTOLs cheaper to operate than similar passenger models with just a helicopter?
I would say probably yes, and I can't show you any statistics other than I've saw the numbers that were used by Ilium, which is the German counterpart to Archer, that makes a really strong economic case, because it takes a helicopter to operate a helicopter is horribly expensive, because there's so much maintenance has to be maintained on them. Because you've obviously got all those moving parts up there above it, and then out the tail rotor and all that, and that requires a great deal of maintenance. I have seen the statistics on operating, for example, a Navy helicopter, and
Yeah.
a Navy helicopter seems like it's operating at something. I'm going to just throw out a number, and it's probably wrong, but it's something like $500 an hour or something, like that. And then the bigger the aircraft, it gets into the tens of thousands of dollars to operate per hour. So I would say probably yes, because again, you're dealing with an electric motor, you're dealing with batteries. Depending on how it's configured, whether it uses sort of a tilt rotor or tilt wing, or in Ilium's case, they have ducted fans that are blowing air across the wing and things. But yeah, I would think that probably the operating costs are significantly less. That doesn't change the dynamics of the people involved, obviously, because
Right.
you're still going to have to have a pilot. I think it'll be a while before anybody's going to step into an eVTOL and not have somebody with the epaulets and stripes on their shoulder or something like that. You're greeted by a voice that says, "Hello, I'm your pilot today," right? And
Yeah.
we're going to fly you to your destination.
I'm assuming, when we think about, say, a helicopter, military helicopter is going to grab a vehicle and pick it up and haul it. We think of a Chinook, right? Or Chinook.
Oh yeah, it has to be a very large helicopter. Yeah.
Right. And so you have a lot of rotor space, pushing that air. So you could see a Chinook being an EV. Okay. I could picture one being able to fly with a big enough battery that it could be an EV. That's the thing that I haven't quite gotten. It's like, well, why are all the eVTOLs look like drones as opposed to a helicopter design? That part I haven't quite understood.
Yeah, because it just
Any thoughts?
With drones, with a helicopter, you need mechanical linkages to take and change the speed and change the pitch of the rotor, right? That's what makes you be able to fly forward, backward, sideways, and things like that. With a VTOL, because you got multiple motors and those are being controlled electronically, then with through the software and the processors, you can do the same effect, fly backwards, fly sideways, fly forward, and things, just by changing slightly, not the pitch, but changing the speed of the motors. And so that simplifies it enormously. You don't have, and I used to know all these terms when I was a young kid, but all of the coupling that goes into that, making that swash plates and all those things that make a helicopter do what a helicopter does, you do away with that in a VTOL. And some of them take different, like you've got the Archer uses, a drone approach, whereas Ilium out of Germany is using, ducted fans flowing, built into the wing and pushing air over the surface of the wing. So everybody's using something a little bit different approach. They work. I think there's a company, we've got the Paris Olympics coming up here in about another week or so. There's a company there out of Germany that was going to provide air taxi service with their eVTOL around the city. So, they're all different. Everybody's experimenting slightly to see what's going to work. Which one comes out the winner? We'll probably have any number of them that will be economically viable, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I was going to say it probably won't just be one. It'll be more like cars where you have 10 of them. Or something like that. You
got pickups, you got Jeeps, you've got race cars. So,
oh wow, was that thunder?
Yeah.
So
like
it's pouring rain where I'm at, but I don't see any sign. Well, if we had thunder, I wouldn't. Oh, I just heard some. My house just is pretty quiet.
Yeah, well, I heard something too. So maybe I heard you. It's not doing anything here right now. I mean, I went out for a walk this morning and got wet, but that wasn't too bad.
No, it's coming down hard over here.
Yeah.
We live in the same town, but we live we live several miles apart.
Right. Yeah.
So, anyways,
he lives that way.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about CATL's new aircraft batteries.
Now, this is the one that's interesting because you and I talk about CATL all the time, CATL, contemporary Ampex technology, whatever.
Oh, by the way, anybody offended? We know it's pronounced CATL. We live in
Yeah,
Nebraska. We call it cattle.
yeah,
Okay, that's
right.
the Nebraska
Moo.
pronunciation. Yeah.
Their CEO came out at the World Economic Forum, what they called Summer Davos, or something like that, and said that they had successfully tested their new what did they call that? Not compression, but a new battery that has 500 watt hours per kilogram, which is double what's in the batteries they manufacture for their cars. And those batteries go in their Teslas and everybody else's car anymore. But this is double that. And of course, once you get up in that range, now people start talking about powering aircraft. It's still nowhere near the energy density of aviation fuel, nowhere close. But it's a heck of a lot better than what a conventional batteries that power our laptops or power your Tesla can do. So he announced that they had successfully tested it in a 4-ton aircraft. What is that? 4 tons, 8,000 pounds. Again?
Did you hear that?
No.
That one was close. That one was close.
That's weird. You're just over there and I can't hear a weird. Okay. So anyway, so they had there again. Here we go. He said that they had tested this in a 4-ton vehicle, and that they were hoping to have soon a 8-ton vehicle, which of course is 16,000 pound aircraft that can fly from 2,000 to 3,000 kilometers. Now that's remarkable. And of course, he's standing up there on stage delivering this thing with a big screen behind him, and they have an illustration of an aircraft that looks, like a Boeing 707 or an Airbus, A340 or something like that, which is not an 8,000 or 16,000 pound vehicle. That is, it's 10 times that number. So this got me to think, well, okay, none of the articles, and there's a half dozen companies have written, publications have written articles on this, and not one of them identified what that 4,000 pound aircraft was. And he didn't say. So I got to looking and thinking, well, what are they testing this thing in? And so I asked my friend Pi to do some research for me. I said, we'll list some aircraft, Chinese aircraft companies that make general aviation or short haul, what I would call short haul aircraft. And it listed some. And the only logical one that I could find was a company that produces, it's called EVIC, and the aircraft is called a Lead Air AG3000. Now that's actually a further on development of an aircraft that is currently being built in Bend, Oregon.
Okay? Oh, how about that?
Yeah. So apparently at some point, this Bend, Oregon company did some kind of a deal with interestingly, a Russian multi-billionaire, and that somehow then got involved with the Chinese to build. Now, any pilots here will probably recognize, basically this aircraft is the same class as a Pilatus turboprop. So that is the closest Chinese-built general aviation / commercial aviation, because you can use that Pilatus turboprop for both private aviation, fly your corporate executives around, or you can use it to haul cargo, or you can use it to haul, small numbers of commercial passengers, depending on how their certificate is structured. So that's the closest I could find was the AG3000. And that would make a good target, because a single engine turboprop, and all they had to do obviously is take out the turboprop, put in a nice large electric motor, balance the battery packs, so the CG on the aircraft is correct, and they can fly it. Now, when I saw this headline originally, I thought, wow, they got an airplane that'll fly, 1,200 miles. Fantastic. They test flew a vehicle for 1,200 miles. No, they did not test fly a vehicle for. In fact, that 4,000, he does not specifically say how. Not only he does not say what the aircraft was, but he doesn't say actually how far and how long they flew. He just says, well, we're hoping by such and such a date in the future, 5 years or whatever it is, that we're going to be able to, have an aircraft that will seat. I think he said something like 160 some passengers is what was
Damn.
reported. There is no aircraft that weighs 8 tons and can carry 169 passengers, more like 10 or 12 passengers. That's the best you're going to get out of an 8-ton or 16,000-pound aircraft. The Chinese build a comparable aircraft to the 737. The company is called the COMAC, and it's called the C919. And that aircraft weighs 42,000 pounds. Not 4,000 pounds.
Yeah.
So I don't know. They're either going to make a really light commercial aircraft to carry that many people. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, how much faith I can put in that. We don't know the aircraft. We don't know how far it flew. We don't know the battery capacity. They're making all kinds of really far out projections for this new one they're building. So, okay, maybe they did it, maybe they didn't. But if they did, great. I hope we've got a 500 watt hour, battery that's going to become available, because then you can cut the size of the car batteries in half.
Right. It's twice as dense as the car batteries. But Mike Herzog and I talk about this all the time on Wednesdays, because I'll find all kinds of these announcements of somebody's got a new 1,000-mile battery or all this, and then it's just like it's all theoretical. And and these guys are talking about by 2028 that we may have a 2,000 to 3,000 kilometer aircraft that's all electric. Well, there's a good chance we will, but it's just right now there's not. All we have is lab results, and they're figuring if they can scale up.
And successfully a successful test flight. We don't know where. We don't know how long. We don't know anything about the aircraft. Something tells me somebody's blowing some smoke here.
Well, if CATL is doing it in conjunction with COMAC, which is COMAC is owned by the Chinese government, then there's probably no shortage of funding to make it happen.
Yeah, they're the guys that are making the C919. So
now,
and it's in service with airlines in, I think, Thailand and airlines in China. So I don't doubt that part. But those airplanes, I looked up the empty weight of that airplane. It's like 42,000 pounds.
You look at we were just talking about universal hydrogen and how they went bankrupt, but they're not funded by something like an organization like CATL, or the Chinese government behind them.
Right.
And so a lot of development, a lot of R&D has been paid for in the last few years by the Chinese government, but also Tesla's sharing their EV tech with the Chinese. So, and they're kind of open source about a lot of their tech. They're like, hey, you can come use our tech and see if it's something helpful. But it is kind of interesting to see an article like this where the advanced battery boasts an energy density of 500 watts per kilogram at the single cell level. Well, didn't NASA come up with this in their for their Sabre batteries? I mean, aren't they similar? I mean, it's really energy dense. So, NASA's come up with something as well.
Yeah, possibly.
Anyways,
that I can't say I'm familiar with. That's no comment till I look it up. So,
right. Anyways, all right. So we have
one left.
Discuss it. It's interesting. So all right. So let's talk about your Donald Trump fact check on electric
So
planes.
apparently, and this, I think this was done at a rally, that he didn't understand how electric airplanes worked. He said, what happens, if the sun goes down, they can't fly at night, things like that. And they're going to fall out of the air as soon as the sun gets cut off. So let me educate you, Mr. Trump. Electric airplanes, as we currently know them, I mean, we don't have any dilithium crystals or anti-gravity devices that we're aware of yet, currently require a battery. And that battery can either be charged on the ground, or if there's enough wing and surface area, you could theoretically put solar panels on the wings and then charge the battery. Now, there was a project called the Solar Impulse out of Europe, where two gentlemen in a great big airplane with a wingspan of, I think it was like a 747, flew around the world only on solar power. Now, the way this worked is that they didn't do it nonstop. They had to make hops, but they were fairly lengthy hops. And so they would literally fly, one pilot would fly for days and then land. So, for example, in going across the Pacific, one pilot flew from Japan to Hawaii, which took him something like 2.5, 3 days. Then the next pilot took it from Hawaii to San Francisco, similar. Now, the way this worked is in the daytime, they would take that up above the clouds and they would fly where they could have their wings exposed to the sun and use that sun on the solar panels all across the wings to charge the batteries. And then at night, when the sun went down, the airplane would slowly, in a programmed descent, use its glide ratio plus the power in its batteries to give it forward momentum. So you had both the glide ratio and the electric power that would take the aircraft and it would take it down. I know it was like 5 or 6, 10,000 feet, something like that. At which point, when the sun came up, so did the airplane, flew all day in the sunshine, recharged the batteries, and they did that non-stop from Japan to Hawaii and non-stop from Hawaii to San Francisco. And they literally circled the globe. So yes, you can fly an airplane on solar power. Now, how fast were they going? Oh, about 50 miles an hour.
Oh, that was a long trip. Oh,
it was a very long trip. And the pilots learned before they flew, the pilots learned to do micro sleep so that they would because they couldn't sleep at night, obviously, because they had to fly. So they had pre-programmed learned how to do brief micro sleeps, something I do occasionally, inadvertently, but the little brief micro sleeps. And so they could literally fly days on end and stay alert and stay healthy for that period of time. So that was a special skill that they had to learn and develop, but they could do it. So these aircraft that we're talking about, the Sea Glider, the Luminaire and Ilium, and Archer and all these guys have battery packs. Now I know you have, Mr. Trump, issues with battery packs, especially if they're in the water and there's a shark nearby, right? But you don't have to worry because the Sea Glider operates like a boat, okay? And the Archer air type class aircraft are generally only going to operate very short periods of time over the water, connecting Oyster Point in San Francisco to Oakland or San Jose or Napa Valley. So the technology works. Is it perfect? No. Do we need more energy density? Absolutely. And as the one person pointed out in the article where they categorized him, the current Republican candidate, as dumber, and that's his words, not mine, dumber than a box of rocks. Those aircraft will not be a problem for people that are trying to fly in them. Just, we got enough. In fact, I think one of them is even planning on having a parachute safety system involved with it. So now I got it here.
That's you. That's you. That's not me.
That's me. Yeah, that's me. Okay. So anyway, they work. We're making progress. There's the one, like I said, the one person pointed out what they need is more money, which obviously the folks at the Horizon
I'm looking,
found out.
One of the articles you had found on this was from Forbes, and the quote from him was, "All they know is electric. They want electric army tanks. They want electric planes. What happens if the sun isn't shining while you're up in the air?" Now, I think I told you a while back, I was on a call with the Army talking about basically their needs for, converting a lot of vehicles over to electric and whatever. But they were mainly speaking of like campus type vehicles, like vehicles bases that could drive around on the bases and stuff like that. There's obviously some issue if you were trying to use electric vehicles out in the field is where you're going to charge them, right? And because that's a bit of a challenge. But they discovered in the current conflict,
figure out how to tap
the lightning,
right there.
The lightning, yeah. But in the current conflict in Ukraine, they figured out how to launch some infantry attacks using e-bikes because they can travel quickly and they can do it quietly. Yep. And so, I would say, he mentions electric.
Not when he mentions electric drones.
Go ahead.
That are making tanks obsolete.
Right. Well, he mentioned electric army tanks, and I think there'd be a problem there because I think before you probably even hear a tank, you can feel the ground shaking.
Yeah.
I mean, because they're so heavy, and so an electric tank would still be pretty damn heavy, but it would not make a lot of noise.
And
so that might be,
and it would have zero heat signature.
Well, and that would be pretty cool too.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah. So there are some advantages to electric combat vehicles, but the whole problem of where you're going to charge them, we talk about it. People make an argument about the cars and stuff like that all the time. That might be a little bit more questionable. Yeah. But I think there are legitimate military purposes for all electric vehicles if you can figure out how to get them in the field and how you can charge them. I mean, we had this one day we were talking, and this might have been Mike and I, about these vampire drones that basically are being used to inspect electrical transmission lines, but they are charging themselves from being close to the transmission lines. And so I could see some tech like that, but you have to have those electric lines have to still be working.
Have a working grid, and from the Russian strategy being employed in the Ukraine, let's blow up the Russian or blow up the Ukrainian power grid. So there's a podcast that I listened to of a gentleman that's an American reporter that's in Kiev. And he's on a couple times a week. And here of late, he's had no, power for most of the day. And he uses, when he does have it, to charge his battery so he can do his podcast. So.
Yeah. Well, you got to do what you got to do sometimes. Anyways, Bill, that's all I've got for today.
Folks, well, that was plenty.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks to the folks who tuned in, and hope you come back to get more of our fun and frivolity as we wade into the crazy world of electric vehicles. And
well, it was different talking just about them, so. We haven't had much news on electric trains for a while, so we haven't really been discussing those.
I can fix that. Just let me know when you want it.
Yeah. Well,
starting with the high-speed train in San Francisco. They got their final between San Francisco and LA. They got their final environmental clearance to on the last stretch of the track, so they're ready to go.
Nice. Well, maybe
Now,
we can
how
talk
long it'll
about
take to
that.
build it?
Oh, you know what? We're probably not going to do a July 4th
Oh, that's
show.
fine.
Yeah.
I got
So, anyways,
I
we
got
won't be here
ribs to
Thursday.
barbecue.
There you go. There you go. But anyway, so we'll be back next week, folks. Once again, thanks for watching. Everybody have a great day.